Jedi business, go back to your drinks.
Welcome, all are welcome. Old fans, new fans. Thanks for joining another episode of Jedi Business. Joining me once again, Darthzartan. Polly, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Good, good. How was your week?
That was good. It's a little bit cooler, so I can always take a cooler temp. I'm good for that.
Definitely. Well, we're going to get right into the show. We're going to break it down just as normal. Oh, one quick housekeeping business. Just wanted to say we hit 50 viewers on our podcast over a couple different outlets, and I just want to. I know that doesn't sound like very much, but for only being on a month, 50 separate views is pretty good in my book.
Oh, that's good. That's a start.
Yeah. Just wanted to say thanks, and we did get a couple comments on the videos. Thank you for commenting. Anyone else wants to comment, feel free. We're gonna do like normal. We're gonna break down Acolyte episode 8. But before we do, I just wanted your opinion, Paul. Your overall thoughts on the series, but not from a reviewer's perspective as far as writing and directing, but from a fan's perspective, from lore, from how it fits in with the story of Star Wars. What are your thoughts?
I think just looking at it sort of at that 30,000 foot level, just kind of looking at big picture, I was always a little suspect once Disney made the decision to buy out Lucas for $4 billion back in 2012. So everything that's come after that, I've always kind of had one eye on the past and one eye looking forward, saying, hey, I understand there's going to be new things, new concepts potentially, but more importantly, just a new vision on some things as far as where they want to go. And as long as it sort of made sense, or it felt like it tied into the existing universe, I felt like I was good with it. For instance, I think Rogue One, as far as movies go, is probably the best of the ones that have come out since Disney acquired Star Wars. And I think as far as the TV shows or streaming shows, I would say Andor was probably the best representation. And Mandalorian, they both have different feels to it. But if you look at the original trilogy, I think you can say the same thing. Star Wars had a different feel than Empire. Empire had a different feel than Jedi, and Jedi felt different than the previous two. So within the vein of Star Wars, I feel like this show really didn't capture what I considered a Star Wars vibe or feel to it. I think as a longtime Star Wars fan, someone who's been there, I'm going to be 53 years old this year. So, when I think back to what I enjoyed as a kid, and even just with the way the story flowed, this just didn't, to me, match up, even with some of the more recent stuff that's come out.
Did it affect the story of the lore in any way? I mean, episode
Well,
3, everyone going around, this breaks the lore, this breaks Star Wars, and I didn't necessarily feel so, but what are your thoughts overall?
so I think there's a couple things, right? And keep in mind, I for a number of reasons, I haven't followed sort of the new timeline perhaps as closely. When I say that, I'm talking about the comics. I'm talking about all forms of media, including what we see visually in addition to the books. I'm just not fully invested time wise into all that I was, say, in the 80s and 90s. But based on my understanding of the Star Wars universe, I feel like certainly there's now apparently, I don't know if I can mention anything from this last episode yet, if you want to kind of just dip
Yeah,
into.
no, go for it.
So, the little quick peek of Plagueis, that's my guess as far as who was introduced, right? So that just feels like, okay, that's potentially a big shift, because, that obviously has ramifications down the road. The whole concept of Vergence, Palpatine's appearance later, if they decide to do a second series, all this will
Yeah, they're
unfold.
basically saying he got the idea, or he's going to get the idea from the witches.
Right. And so there's that. There was also some discussion about the witches, even though that, like you were just touching on, I think in those early episodes, that doesn't seem to be too radical for me, only because we've seen the Dathomir witches really kind of introduced and then reintroduced, almost a 30-year gap between, right? So they were initially introduced in the Zahn trilogy, and then I think in later books that came out in the 90s, and then obviously during the animated stuff that's been coming out with Filoni stuff, they were sort of reintroduced there. So to bring this coven of witches forward, to me, is not a new concept, and the idea that you know, what one group may call the Force, another group may call it something else. I mean,
Exactly. I
so
like that.
I don't have an issue with that. I didn't see. I mean, I could talk about maybe the mechanics of it, but that's probably more script and directorial as opposed to, hey, the concept. So that's I get it. I don't have a real huge issue with it, but um, the appearance of Kiadi kind of seems a little bit odd, just based on some of the comments. Again, I don't know what their time frame is as far as a lifetime in their world, the Syrians' world, as far as how long they live. But some of the comments that he made certainly is different from some of the comments he may have made or what could be interpreted in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
Yes. Yes.
So
Well,
there's things like that I would have some issues with.
for me, a lot of people complain. Well, just to bring up a name, Star Wars Theory, because he's well known in the Star Wars universe
Yeah.
of fans. He has a lot of problems with Mundi and with Pelagus showing there, and with the witches, and with Pelagus seemingly to get the idea of creating Anakin from the witches, blah blah blah. To me, a lot of that change, even a changing of a birth date or stuff like that, I understand lore's important, but for a story, I could see things being retconned a little bit. But one thing, if there was one thing that really bothered me, and it wasn't the twins and all that, although we'll get into that, there are problems with that. But the one thing lore wise that bothers me out of all of it, it's just the way they showed the Jedi. I understand them trying to show them becoming more under the control of the Senate, but they just, especially with what Vanestra ends up doing with Soul and all that, they came off as politicians rather than Jedi. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I would go. I think you hit a very good point. I mean, in addition, or maybe one step beyond that, I mentioned that I think in an earlier episode, it's this idea that they were running around the galaxy, or at least on this planet, like a bunch of rookies or amateurs, or here you supposedly had
Yeah,
a Jedi
like buffoons,
and
man.
two Jedi Knights and a Padawan. That should have been a pretty well versed group, especially if it's just the four of them out there. So a lot of just reckless emotion and actions. It just was out of line or out of sync with, I think, what we've all been led to believe the Jedi were.
If anything, I would have expected them to be more a thousand years of peace, tail end of the High Republic. They should have been on the ball. I mean, I could see one or two, I could see here and there things happening, but just especially with what the cover up and all that and hiding from the Senate. But we'll get into it. Let's get into the episode. Let's break it down. Okay, so it picks up basically where episode 6 left us after the flashback episode of 7. Osha has the helmet on. Now, this is one of the things I actually found pretty interesting. I think they actually should have focused more on this with Kamir and Osha. I kind of like that she became more in tune with the Force by putting that helmet on, in the sense because it's a sensory deprivation. And I kind of like that scene, but one thing I don't like is how, and it goes back to what we talked about 2 episodes ago. It just doesn't make sense that she would be so trusting of this guy when he just literally just murdered people she's known her whole life, with Yord, friends like Jackie. It doesn't ring true of the character.
Well, that goes to what we've pointed out from the beginning, which has to do with the writing. I think if in fact this was a, let's say, 24 episode story arc or 26 episode traditional TV, right, that basically took place from the 1950s up through probably 7-8 years ago, right? That's how TV shows were made. Each year you had that many episodes to work with, build character arcs, build the story. So in only 8 episodes, you only have so much time to do that. But I still say in 8 episodes you could have accomplished that, but
They could have, yeah.
they did a poor job of executing it.
And they should have, not only that, but they should have slimmed it down. I know the whole story was the Power of Two, the twins and all that, but they almost didn't need it. It would have been much more interesting, Osha as an ex-Jedi being corrupted by this other ex-Jedi, and them going on a mystery hunt to see who's killing who and what's going on. It's just like they have some truly great ideas. If someone were to talk to you about, okay, I have this concept,
Yeah.
but just they added too much. There was too much there for the amount of time that they had.
Yeah, well, too many plot points potentially that didn't get fleshed out enough to make it all sync up. So rather than going in three, four, or more directions, they could have gone in maybe two directions, right? So you have your major sort of plot, or whatever.
Streamlined it.
Yeah, streamline it, keep it simple with just the main plot, and then maybe you have a subplot, and that's it. And you could have easily accomplished that, I think, within 8 episodes, easy. When I've never produced a show, I've never
Yes,
written it,
yes. No,
but
I
but just based on my experience as the viewer, I've seen a lot of different shows over the years that I think pulled something like similar off, right? Which you just put too much in there, and I think sometimes when you put too many ingredients in the pot, you ruin the meal, as they say. So I think in this case they just put too much in there, mixed it up, and just it
it
kind
was a
of
mess. It was a mess.
kind of felt like at times they were just throwing stuff up against the wall and saying, yeah, let's just go with this. And it's like, well, that doesn't really jive with what we understand this or this to be, based on the history, based on what we know. So I do have two questions. Maybe you can help me.
Sure.
So um what did you get the sense that she was just overwhelmed in the helmet, or do you think she in some way, because she was having a hard time breathing, so I thought, well, maybe she was just having a hard time with all these senses, these feelings coming in, or was it she was actually suffocating in some way, like
No, the way I see it, if we go back to actually her whole character the whole time, even when they were kids, she didn't use. She never. We never seen her actually using the Force.
yeah,
Go back to when they were kids. I mean, she may have used it a little bit, but it was actually May that really did the fighting when she was practicing with their mother, and this and that. It wasn't Osha, and even during the fights, they never actually showed Osha using the Force per se. So the way I took it as maybe once she left the Jedi, she was, okay, I'm done with that part of my life. It's almost like a muscle that's not used, it just becomes atrophied. So once she put on the helmet, like Kamir was saying, it's just you and the Force and whatever you bring with you. It was almost like she was feeling that the power of the Force, it was just overwhelming to her. She's starting to see visions of the future or whatever. And so I just took it as her getting back in tune with the Force and just kind of overwhelming her as opposed to just her suffocating or anything like that.
yeah, and that's kind of what my first thought was, but then I thought, well, maybe there was something more to it. But I think it was probably just an overwhelm feeling, being in that, and maybe having been exposed to that for the first time in years, right? So
Right.
and then the other thing was, is I noticed now this seems to be a trend with the witches and now Kamir. When he was, I guess, tapping into the Force, all of a sudden his eyes go black. That's something new?
Well, that was what that was when the witches did it when they took out when the mother she took over Torben. It was to me that just seemed like a reflection of her power of the way she tapped in the Force, and Osha actually being from them. She was lashing out with the Force because she was in the helmet. She's getting a rush of feeling, and I just took it as because nobody else had the eye thing when they were using the Force besides those two, the witches, and I just took it as okay, she's coming to it from the way the witches interacted with the Force, so she was kind of taking over him, which is why he wasn't able to move or
So
anything.
he would have been like Torben was to the mom.
Yeah,
He,
exactly. He wasn't
oh,
using
okay.
the Force. He was being. That's why he had to struggle trying to get to her because she was lashing out with the Force, and so he like with Torben and the mother, he was kind of being taken over. I was like, oh crap, which is why he was struggling to get the helmet off.
Okay.
That's the way I
All right.
took it, anyway.
Well, that's probably a good summary of what actually happened. I think that
Okay,
probably
so from there,
makes the most sense.
yeah, so from there we go to Soul, and damn boy, if they didn't just take the best character on the show and just made him a dummy. And this goes back to another thing with a lot of the characters, their motives and they change, and then their abilities change from one scene to the next. It just doesn't make sense. So okay, here's Soul's taking May back to Brendok because he wants to prove the virgins. He's called Vanessa. We're going to meet. But the point is, why? Why is he suddenly back all interested in the virgins? If that was so important, why wasn't he dealing with this the whole 16 years? Why isn't he trying to get May to say, okay, where would Kamir have taken Osha? It's like he's all into the virgins again, and then they're having a discussion. He's trying to tell her, He goes, I wanted to talk to you. But again, she was there when he did it. What has he got to talk to her about? Just about the virgins, trying to explain that he thinks they're one person split? And why doesn't May seem interested? I mean, if someone told me you're split somehow and the mother created you, I'd be kind of interested. But May seems nothing. She just keeps saying, you did this, you did this. But freaking May's the one that started the fire. And it's like, she started the fire. Nobody else did that. Yes, okay, Soul stabbed the mother, but May's the one that started the fire and locked them all in. It's like it's
Yeah.
no responsibility. He's going on about how they're not twins, they're not sisters, and May doesn't seem to care. And then while he's talking to her, she's breaking out. How does he not sense that? He's this master Jedi. How does
Yeah, no, this is again another example of like, okay, so I mean, if you're such a, in this case, he's a Jedi Master. He's not even a Jedi Knight, which he was when he found the girls. You should be that far along, I would think, in your training or understanding of the Force. He would have figured out sooner that she was, not Osha. She was May when she was on the ship. And then, like you said, I thought the same thing. He should have been able to sense that she was trying to get out of the restraints. I mean, again, these are not these are beyond belief, I think, for someone who's followed Star Wars and followed the way the
and then
Jedi
even when
work.
she's running for it, he doesn't use the force to stop the door from shutting, blah blah blah. Okay, so we go into the next scene, and this actually I give credit as one of the best scenes of the whole show. I thought it was a beautiful scene when she goes into the asteroid field and he chases her. If you're wondering where the 180 million went, that's one of the places it went. I thought it was pretty beautiful. It's like I put that
Yeah,
right up there with one of the best Star Wars chase scenes ever. I'll put that against any.
yeah. No, I thought the same thing as far as the effects, but I did have a little bit of a problem though with it, and that's it didn't appear as there were any deflector shields, certainly on the big ship, much less the smaller ship. And I'm like, those rocks or chunks of ice that would have done plenty of damage to both of those ships. So I don't get it. I that part of it, I'm like, well, I love the beauty of what they did special effects wise, but as far as
Minutes. I thought it was
right, and as far as how it would operate, that would be problematic. I mean, both of them probably wouldn't have survived that high speed pursuit going through those rocks slash
Yeah,
chunks
that's
of
true,
ice.
but we gotta suspend belief for a little bit. But yeah, okay. So he's chasing her. He wants her alive to prove the virgins. And what is he doing? Is he that ship doesn't have a tractor beam. He's locking in. It looks to me he's locking in to shoot her down. It's like why he's gonna try to kill her? It's like why is he trying to kill her? I mean, he's lining up. He's got the switch locked. It's not some laser to knock her out. It looks like he's locking in to shoot her.
Well, once again, I mean, again, there's some inconsistencies on things that he does right, things that he does wrong, but the things he does wrong are pretty bad, right? In terms of, the whole thing, what we saw in the last episode, the flashbacks where he's trying to break in and he's pushing his way using his emotions. And then on this episode, just making some dumb calls. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This guy apparently is not ready for prime time as far as Jedi go. I mean, but
He could at least had him talking to himself or something, saying,
something.
"I'm going to try to disable her ship" or something. And
Yeah.
then we go into another stupid thing. Okay, I'm gonna use this name instead of what his real name Basil is because I think it's hilarious. I don't know if you listen to Christian Harloff, but he calls Basil the shit rat. And here we go, the shit rat. And he was just a little while ago trying to stop May himself. He was fighting her, and then why does he stop Soul from shooting her? What does he
Yeah,
have
I
to
don't.
do with her?
I didn't get that either. I was a little confused, and that's usually I like those kind of characters, but I just think they did a poor job with fleshing that character out. And in this case, I couldn't figure out what his motivations were. Was he working for the Jedi, or was he not working for the
Yeah,
Jedi?
I
You
liked
know,
him at first too, but that didn't make sense. And then the more I thought about it, he seems to pop up right. Oh, use the tracker, and then he's gone, and then he's there to do this. It's like it just makes Soul look like an idiot. It's like
yeah, it's just like I said. It just from it's sort of a misrepresentation, in my opinion, of established Jedi lore, I guess, and that in all facets, right, in terms of how we understand the Jedi to be, how we expect them to act, And, I guess that's Leslie Headland would probably defend it and say, well, that's the whole reason why I did the show. The fans are going to scratch their heads and say, what is this all about? Right. So, um,
Yeah, it's almost
yeah.
like they're just they okay, well, we're gonna have this person do this because it furthers the story, but it doesn't make any sense. But it'll take us to the next scene.
Is the idea here that you want, um, just to do something different, just to be different, to say, get people talking and say, oh, I got to watch the next episode? Because I have a feeling what it's done is probably push more people away. I mean, you're going to find people that like the show. That's pretty clear. But I think more people than not are probably not big fans of what she's done in these last 8 episodes. And,
Well, speaking of that too, it's like I know we can be critical of her and her writing and directing, and also of the actors. I mean, you could sit there and say, well, is the girl who plays May and Osha that bad, or is it just the writing? Is Leslie? I mean, is Vanessa
well,
that bad? But that goes to the next scene and proving that if you have a badass actor, he can take something really bad and just and that goes into the next scene when we go back to Coruscant and Vanessa.
her and the senator.
Yeah, when Jimmy Olsen tells uh,
Right.
her that Senator Ravencourt is in this, he, I'm telling you, he was like he was in a different show. It's like he's straight out of Andor. He's I just he has the same dialogue that everybody else, but the way he was the senator. He wasn't a
He's a,
guy playing a character. He wasn't
he's a
the lady Vanessa playing a Jedi. He was amazing.
Well, apparently that's some of where maybe that money went. I don't know. Maybe they've, and as far as getting a few good actors in the show, but then the vast majority of them, I think, just underacted. In other words, they underperformed. And I agree with you. I thought he did a good job, and he did more in those. I don't know. What would you say he had a minute screen
Yeah,
time?
nothing,
I
but he
mean,
just stuck out.
with what he did in that short amount of time was probably light years, pun intended. Um, uh, Better than most, I should say, of the rest of the cast.
You think about that. If they really wanted to, if what she really was trying to say was show how the Jedi are getting intertwined with the Senate, and then she wanted to deal with a murder mystery at the same time, they could have easily, like I said, ditched the whole Twin Witches episode, dealt with Cremere and Osha as a fallen Jedi, and they should have had more with this senator because man, even just the
Well,
nuances, the slight little things like "May the Force be with you." Just like, and then he has the great line is like, when you are looking up to heroes, you don't have to face what's right in front of you. Because basically, he's right. It's like, in a sense, like, okay, what are you going to do when one of you goes rogue or something like that? You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
what the one thing I did like, I mean, or I should say, another thing that I liked about what he did as the character, the actor did for the character and for the larger story overall is you can see if that was the sentiment of, say, let's say half of the senators, or even a percentage that slowly gain momentum over the next 87, 95 years. You can see why in later episodes, in episode 3, where Palpatine, is able to capitalize on probably a number of senators who feel the same way, that say, yeah, what the heck, these guys are a little bit out of control, and you know what, maybe we should give
Yep.
him the authority to do what he feels like he needs to do. So, it's again the larger theme of, I mean, Lucas talks about it in terms of democracy, and how that changes over time in terms of how people feel, perhaps with, whether it's the structure of the government, or perhaps in this case it's Jedi who are effectively part of that government, and people probably feel as though they're either corrupt, or people feel as though there should be some questions that aren't being answered. So
Yeah.
I thought that's one thing I liked about the Andor series, was that there were lines in there and there was dialogue that I thought, man, this is just top notch. Not only just writing, but also how it ties into the bigger universe, and you can think in your head, wow, I can see how we go from here to, pick a movie, as far as
Yes.
down the road. So that was a good scene to sort of illuminate on that. But I can say, there's other stuff that's just kind of throwaway, but with this particular scene with this actor, A+.
As a reviewer wise, I thought he did well. I thought he handled it, but just from a lore perspective, just going into that scene, what didn't make sense is he's there because he says he's heard that there's some kind of mission. I was like, well, how is he heard? Is it just,
Yeah,
maybe they've already got spies within the Jedi, and you know what I'm
maybe,
saying? Uh,
maybe.
it just didn't make sense that, okay. So then we go back to Osha and Kamir, and they're leaving to go because she had the vision. They're going to team up again. Just it doesn't make sense why she would, trust him, um, even though she says, "Well, you made a deal with my sister and you stuck with it." But again, okay, this is going to be important for later. But again, she's going to save Soul, not for her sister. She's seeing May about to kill Soul, so she's going out because this guy has raised her since she was a little girl, right? She's known him as basically her father. Even though they had gone away and split up, she's going because she has a vision of May killing Soul, and she wants to save him. But again, why does she trust Kamir? I don't know. And then we get
Well, you
uh,
know what?
the
It's very simple. It's those top muscles.
yeah, exactly. And then we get the Pelagus cameo, which a lot of people were complaining about, and this and that. I thought it was kind of cool, but the only thing problem I have is just it just seemed a little too late. I think he could have been more in the shadows and seen the Kamir. But this is one thing. It's another thing where they ask him. They pose more questions. Is he working with Kamir, or
Well,
is he watching him?
here's what pissed me off the most. When I saw that, I realized, okay, so they're setting up a second season, which means I really have no interest in seeing the second seasons. But now you want to do that at the very end of this. It's just
Yeah.
it feels obligatory, like, okay, I'm just going to throw this in there and that's going to get people talking or whatever.
Like they did with Yoda later on.
Yeah, bingo, there you go. They did two of those, two guest appearances.
But again, it just as far as lore wise, it's like, okay, are they trying to say he's working with Kamir? Because Kamir had to have known he was there, or does he? Or is he just watching him? I wish they would have answered a little bit more.
Yeah, because right now the viewer is left, at least until there is a season 2, probably a 2-year gap from now. That people are just going to wonder, okay, well, what role does he play? It does potentially answer the question, well, where did Kamir get his training? As far as, granted, I understand he trained as a Jedi, but obviously he's been trained in sort of the dark side of the Force as well. So that's
Legacies.
well, it makes you wonder. And so if that's the case, it's kind of like what the Emperor tried to do with Vader and then later with Luke and Jedi, hoping that, I guess he was, because you knew the three of them weren't going to coexist. So how's this going to work out? My guess would be is Kamir's going to be the one that would get axed.
Yeah, he's gonna get like what happened with Dooku's apprentice.
Right.
Acolyte.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to blank on her name now, even though I like her as a character. I'm trying to blank. But anyways, okay. So then we're back on Brendox. It's like everything's leading us back to where we started, and this is another thing that just okay, it was cool, but it's just annoying because why didn't the Jedi use this power earlier? But Saul basically uses the Force to track where May's at, yet they had to have the Basil earlier. Why couldn't they have done that when they were looking for Kalnaka? Use the Force. But so then we get into, I think, a scene that nobody is talking about. I've heard nobody talk about, but I think it's very, very important, very interesting. And they go back to Coruscant, and Vanestra is talking to someone, and she's saying something like, I need to get in touch with them, and I need to leave a message. Now, obviously, timeline-wise, it doesn't make sense, but the way they're screwing with the timeline and ages, I don't just know. But that voice sounds an awful like Palpatine. Listen to it again. It sounds an awful like Palpatine, because who else would she be talking to? She doesn't need to get a message to go see Yoda. She's in the freaking temple. She doesn't need a message to go get a senator. So who is she trying to get? Is she really on the dark side? Is she working with Pelagus? She's trying to get a message to him? Who is she talking to? Not only one, but what are they talking about? And is she bad?
Yeah, gosh, I can't remember. I thought in the last couple of days, I thought I caught a glimpse of someone discussing that. And now I can't remember what their belief of that connection was. But yeah, there is some thought, I think, that obviously that does lead to something else, which obviously could be picked up in a second season. But the question is who was she talking to? I guess you could say, well, yeah, it's Palpatine, but I think he wouldn't even be born yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But again, the way they're jerking with the people's ages and timeline, you never know.
Well, and they could always, there's an easy workaround on that, right? It's just like he, maybe in the Force or whatever, he was able to, I'm just trying to think for the idiot who's going to be stuck writing this, right? Is basically trying to retcon this idea that,
Well, let me ask you: did you think that sounded like Palpatine, or did your thoughts go there? What were your thought? What were your thoughts?
no, well, and again, it was such a sort of not a
And what do you
throwaway.
think?
It happened so quick. I didn't absorb it. I just kind of, okay, she's talking to this person. I didn't even really focus because I was looking at some other, or thinking about some other things on the show, but I wasn't thinking Palpatine in any way. And I hadn't really given it much thought as far as who she was talking to. But in retrospect, now I do think that obviously that is going to play into, a second season, or somehow it'll be discussed later if any of these concepts get carried on
Do
into
you
some
think
other.
she is working with the bad guys? Possibly.
It's not that. I don't think it's so much that she's working with the bad guys. I wonder if she's just in it for herself. Maybe that's part of the reason why she did the lie and the cover up. She didn't want it. It wasn't so
She's
much for.
no Jedi. She's
Well,
no.
it wasn't so much for the honor of the Jedi. I think it was for her to still be in a position of power, to still influence things. So maybe she is becoming more inclined to sort of dark side use, whether it's she's working with someone or whether she has her own, hard to say,
Yeah, because I actually missed that the first time around, and I think
yeah,
I heard one person talk about it, and they said, "Well, she's trying to get a message to Yoda." I'm like, why would she need to get a message to Yoda?
yeah,
He lives right
yeah.
there with them. And then I
Well,
noticed it the second time I watched, like, whoa, this is huge.
and then for her at the very end to say, "Hey, I need to talk to you," it almost was, the way I took it was, it's going to be the first time he hears about any of this. So that's a
Well,
little
well,
bit.
well, wait, we'll get to that because that doesn't make sense either. But we'll get to that in a second.
Right, right. You know what I mean, though, in terms of the flow, it doesn't make sense. Like what you said, why would it be Yoda? It has to be someone else that who she's talking to. That's my point. So,
Okay, so yeah, so then Kamir and Osha are on, back on Brendok, and they're at the door, and there has to be more to Kamir because he knows so much, so many things he's saying. Uh, like, how does he know the secret way to get in? You figure Osha would know that because she freaking lived there when she was a kid. Kids
yeah,
know their whole spot. I knew all kinds of spaces to get in my house when I was younger that no one would know how to get. You know what I'm saying? It's like how does he teleporting in? He didn't climb up like Soul. It's like she says, "Well, we're gonna have to get this elevator working to get in." He goes, "Are you sure?" And blah blah blah. And he vanishes. He suddenly is in. How did he know? And then, but from there we go to the third thing, which I thought was very well done, along with the space chase and Senator Ravencourt, which was, I thought, the fight between Soul and Kamir, one of the best lightsaber. The only thing I didn't like was when they jumped from the balcony or whatever, and they kind of did that whole crouching tiger, hidden dragon. Maybe if they had done a whole scene like that, it would have worked better. But to me, it just kind of took me out,
well,
too matrixy. And
I think there were two, maybe three sort of wire work scenes. Kind of like you said, in the vein of traditional Hong Kong cinema or something. And there was a scene where Soul was kicking him, kind of like at an angle, but he was
yep,
in the air. I thought that looked good.
yeah, I
But
did.
what I agree with you. The one scene or sequence that I had a problem with is they were coming off of that. I guess it was a balcony or bridge or whatever.
Yeah,
The way he came down at that angle and the way he landed just didn't look normal.
it didn't flow
Granted, this is all fantasy, but even in the flight of movement, it just didn't look normal how he landed. So that's more of a critique, but as far
yes,
as the
yes, yes.
technique. But I agree with you. I thought the overall sequence for them fighting over what 2 minutes or whatever it was, it was good. It
It
was
was
good.
awesome. And it just, but here, okay, I'm going to make a comment here because Soul kicked his ass pretty much.
Yeah.
Even when he flipped his saber and his shorter one around and came in, Soul beat him good. So obviously Soul's a master because Kamir's pretty good. He had just taken out Tanaka, and he killed what, 4 or 5 Jedi, 6 Jedi on that other planet. So Kamir's no slouch, and Soul took him out pretty badass way, right?
Yeah, and I liked it, not just the fact that he used his lightsaber, but when he did use the Force, it was kind of like a Force blow, like boom, like he pushed the sabers away and basically threw Khmer into the rock. It was like, hey, he's no one to be messed with or trifled with. But granted, we know he's made some stupid mistakes in the series, but
Right.
that was a pretty good sequence as far as
Fighting
fight.
wise, oh, he's it, or
Yeah,
so we think. But hang on.
yeah.
Okay, so then we get to the part which actually, if we were more invested, should have been the whole crux of the whole series, and that is Osha and May's reunion. May continues with her, "I didn't do this. It was Soul that killed our mother." But she did do it. She started the fire and locked them all in. But she takes no responsibility. Same way Soul kind of way he doesn't take a little responsibility himself. He keeps saying, "Oh, I did it, but what I thought was right." He should have never been in that position in the first place. Obviously, they should have never broken in. But May did have a lot do with it. And then they have their little fight and everything, and it didn't have the emotional impact because I don't know. I don't know.
Um, yeah. So that's fair, right? In terms of, again, it just feels kind of herky jerky. Like one moment someone's mad at someone, the next moment they're buddy buddy, and it's like you said earlier. Why would she react the way she did? Not affectionately. What's the word I'm looking for? But basically, like, okay, yeah, you tried to kill everybody earlier. In fact, you did kill people, but in terms of maybe how Osha felt against Khmer, and then later, obviously, she flips pretty easily in my mind. But it's the same thing here. It's kind of like they just flipped a switch. Like, okay, well, here we are back together. As opposed to, again, could this have been worked out maybe with better writing? Could this have been worked out with 12 episodes? Or, I still say it could have been done in 8 episodes, but it's just the way it was carried out. It's too much to me. I think if you enjoy good, viewing of whatever you're watching, a movie, of a TV show, it just doesn't ring true, right? As far as why a character would just flip like
Right.
that sudden. And the other issue I did have a problem with, I know other fans have brought this up over the years, and I can't remember when this was introduced. Again, I think it was after Disney had acquired the property, but this whole idea that the lightsaber crystal is going to change from blue to red.
Wait. We're gonna get to that. Okay, so May and Osha have their fight, and there's a thing that they've done in the series which, as I've rewatched it, I just think is stupider and stupider. And it's not the first time it happens. It's actually happened a lot. It happened with Jackie, a couple other characters, but something will happen, and the character will look like, for example, in this one, May and Osha are fighting. As they're fighting, the Jedi start to show up. So they both look up in the sky, and Osha's looking up there, and she's looking up there, and then she looks down, and May's gone. Okay, one, why did May just leave if she's sitting there trying to convince her? But two, this whole thing of where the character actually looks away and then something happens. Like if they're fighting and she's looking away, why didn't May just knock her out right there? And it happened earlier with Jackie when she was fighting Khmer. When he broke her lightsaber, she looked down at her lightsaber for a few seconds and then he vanishes. Why would you look down at your lightsaber when you're in the middle of the fight? He could have killed her right there. You know what I'm saying? Just a couple instances, and if you were to look at it again, it happens more than once where a character looks at something for a few seconds just to give the other character time to leave, and I just thought that was stupid.
Well, I guess they were looking at it as kind of a moment of surprise. I mean, some movies, some characters have done that, or a moment of reflection, But again, that's not how the real world works, and I guess that's a little too much for me to suspend for the belief. I think I just thought, same as you. It just doesn't ring as authentic, right?
Yes, yes. So from there, May runs off again. She's every. If you're to rewatch the show, how many times the character just runs off? And then we go back to Soul and Khmer, and there is one dumb thing that I just was so stupid. When I liked the idea initially when I'm saying, oh wow, he's trying to get Soul's saber to hit his helmet so it'll conk off. But all he had to do when Soul's struggling to pull back is just do one of the things you did as a kid when you're pulling your friend's hand, let go, and he'll slap his own face. All Khmer had to do was turn his lightsaber off, and Soul would have chopped his own self in the head with his lightsaber. Even if he had just flicked back, he could have flicked Soul in the head with his own lightsaber, or just turned it off, and Soul would have smacked his own. I'm serious. Watch that scene. It's just kind of dumb. But anyways, so beyond that, Soul defeats Khmer, who's obviously been trained. He's obviously was a Jedi, and he's been trained by the dark side. And then we come again to something just so inconsistent. May just pops up and disarms him like that, like in a few moves. A master Jedi, he doesn't censor. Again, he doesn't censor. She pops in and she just disarms him like that.
Yeah, well, that's again, it just doesn't match up with reality, or at least fictional reality, based on what we know in that universe.
Yeah. And this goes to something else she's saying. She doesn't want to kill him. She wants him to face the Jedi Council. But just a couple episodes before, wasn't May the one saying, "I'm going to turn myself into the Jedi Council. I'm going to tell them what I did." Again, it goes to one of those, what you were saying, just like a switch. It's like, okay, I'm a killer. I got to do this. I'm going to turn myself in. When you got a chance to turn yourself in, now you're going to run away. And now you're back, but you don't want to turn yourself in. You want to turn this guy in. I think May, Osha, not so much, but May is one of the worst written characters because her motivations change like every episode. It's just, again, she's like, why did you kill her? And then she sees that Osha's back there, so she's trying to get him to admit it. Once Osha comes out, it's like, is that true? Why did she tell me? Just a few episodes, he's been telling her, we need to talk. I want to tell you something. And again, why didn't he explain? Why didn't he say, hey, your mother turned into a smoke monster and May was starting to vanish? I didn't know. It was an accident.
Yeah. I mean, I
He
thought
didn't
about
even
it.
get a chance to explain.
Right. And I guess, I mean, certainly that's not the direction of where the director wanted to go. So, hey, it doesn't really matter what he would have said. He would have been killed, I guess, by someone. But I thought the same thing. Like, well, wait a second, time out. Let's just slow it down a minute and let the guy fricking say what he needs to say, and you guys are going to listen. But that's not the way the show was. That's not the way the show was unrolled. So
yeah, especially since that was basically her dad.
Yeah.
I could see her being angry and maybe start to want to choke him, but
I would think if that was true, if she felt as though he was her dad because he had raised her since she was a child, she would give him the benefit of the doubt. Like, in other words, explain to me, what do you mean? What happened? Why did you do?
Exactly.
Yeah. It just
explain to me what happened.
It not only doesn't ring true within the universe, but it doesn't ring true with reality. I mean, even if you're trying to match it up with human reactions,
it doesn't make sense that she would kill him like that. Okay,
with a red blade, by the way.
Well, that's what we're getting to next, what you were talking about. Okay, now, bleeding a kyber crystal is in the lore, is in the canon, but if you go back to see how it's been done in Disney, in the stories, it's an intense process. Like they showed when Vader did it, it requires a lot of meditation, this and that, for you to be able to do that with the crystal. Supposedly, Vader was unable to do it himself originally for a while. It took a long time. And yet she does it just because she kills Soul. Now, one, if that's all you need to do, why didn't his blade turn red when he slaughtered the younglings? Two, it was a cool visual effect, so I could see why they wanted to do it, but it just didn't make sense in that way. What do you think?
Well, I guess you could argue she's got more midichlorians than he does.
No, she should have half because she's only half a person, where he's a whole chosen one.
No, my point is it's flawed.
I know you're just. I'm
just, it's more tongue in cheek, but yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I think that's just it. It did feel like it was too easy, and I guess that's just the convenience of expedited storytelling, which is okay. Let's get this over with. We'll move on to the next thing. I think it might be a cool visual, but we got to wrap this up. That's kind of how I took the whole thing. Like, it just was jumping from one thing to the next.
Yeah, I guess they could say, because they made a point of showing the lens crack, so the crystal was exposed. So maybe you could say that, but that's why it didn't happen when Anakin killed the younglings, because his crystal wasn't wasn't exposed. It wasn't open, where hers that one was. So she had or something like, just trying to come up with the reason why to explain it. But even so, within the lore of Disney, they've said that it takes a lot of meditation to do it. So it just seemed a little too fast. Okay, so then we get basically Vanestra shows up. She senses Kamir, which I thought that was pretty well done. I was like, oh, you're alive. So obviously now we know that that was her Padawan, and those scars on her back probably did come from her lightsaber whip. And it goes to another stupid thing which I did not like. She shows up and she's able to use the Force to hear and see what happened 16 years ago. I don't remember any Jedi able to do that. One and two, if they have that ability, why didn't they just send her the first time when there was a killer? She could just go out and sense, okay, well, I see who it is, instead of just wondering who it is.
Well,
It makes sense lore-wise.
maybe they carried the concept of gosh, what is that? That's not precognition? It's like I know there's some superhero characters with that, but also I could have sworn even in the Star Wars universe there had been some Jedi who had used something. In other words, you're right. I think she kind of they went a little too far with her power or ability to use it, but I think some have like limited ability to, like you touch a. Well, it's kind of like what they did with Rey touching the lightsaber, right? Remember in the Force Awakens, it's kind of like that, where if they're physically touching something, then they can kind of get an engram, like a memory or something from it, but not just to show up and you're like, oh, okay, I can figure out what happened here 16 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like it's taking it just a little bit to the extreme,
To
like
the
as far as
extreme,
the
yeah.
power. But yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, it just seemed like a WTF. I was like, wait a minute, you see exactly what happened. Like you said, I could see if she sensed, she's getting a sense of what happened, but it's like she had the whole story in her head. So
Yeah.
then we get
Maybe
to
we should have. Maybe the whole thing should have just been what took place in Vanestra's head, and we might have figured out that much more about this show.
yeah, yeah. So then we get to another thing, and this is just ridiculous in my opinion. Okay, we get to Osha and May reunited again, but this time
Mm-hmm.
as friends at the tree, which
Yeah,
they seem to be implying that the tree is the source of the virgin somehow.
could be. Yes,
That's
I
what
kind
they're
of thought I picked up on that. Yeah.
yeah. But they're all like, buddy, buddy, I'm glad to have you. This, but go back to when they were kids. Even though they're sisters, they never showed them getting along.
Right.
It's not like they were showed them as even from the first time they show Osha, she's like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be with you. I want to be my own person. And yet she knows May killed all these people. She just murdered Soul. So it's like, who are we rooting for? Is this the hero character of the series, Osha? Because she just murdered somebody. How are we rooting for her? And it just doesn't make sense they're reuniting, that they'd be so happy, because they never liked each other in the beginning.
Yeah. No. I again, it's just another screwed up way of trying to resolve the storylines, and again, it's inconsistent with the characters, and that's even characters that were just established in this series. That's not even Star Wars lore. That's, like you said, it's like, well, all along the way you showed, animosity, or you could call sibling rivalry or whatever, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I love you. It kind of reminds me of the End of the Color Purple, the Whoopi Goldberg movie, where her and her sister meet up. Now, granted, there wasn't any animosity, but it's kind of like they tried to leave it on a feel good moment, like, hey, they're back together after all these years, and it's they're playing patty cake in a field of lilies or something. It's like, what? I said, it just felt like a disconnect with where the characters have been the whole previous 7 episodes, even up until the last few minutes of this episode. So
Yep.
I don't know, but again.
Then we're reaching the end, but I want you to explain to me why why in the world does, when it ends, why doesn't Osha just go with them? Why do they have to be split up? Why does he have to mind wipe her? And even after that, she's like, I'm gonna find you. Well, why don't you just go with her right now?
Well, and that's a good point. I was going to say the same thing, which was, well, okay, why couldn't you train both of them? I mean, I would argue this. I know someone's going to say, well, the rule of two, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not even mentioned in this whole thing. So why wouldn't he even initially? I got the sense up until Kamir, that is, was still sort of kind of keeping the idea open that he'd get one or the other sister. So to me, it doesn't feel that far of a stretch that he would have picked up both of them if he could. You
Yeah,
know, I mean,
'cause he wanted to kill May for betraying him
right,
allegedly, but
right.
even when May disarmed Soul, he's all like, "Good,
Yeah,
good. Feel the hate, blah blah blah." And then before she says, "I want him to face the council," but see, he's obviously still hoping to get her to kill him. So, like you said, and even if he didn't want to train you, who's to say she couldn't just go to be with him? Or
yeah.
reunite. It just it it didn't make sense again beyond the point of, okay, we need to have them both on, like what you said ages ago when you said it's going to come down to they're going to switch places. One
There
of
you
them's
go.
going to be with one side, the other one's going to, it's just, and when I'm sitting there watching, like, Paul nailed it. It's like, it's exactly what you said. It's like, it didn't make sense. The mind wipe, why? Okay, he didn't have to mind wipe if they left. And then even after he minds, why did she say, I'm going to find you? It's like, none of that made sense.
Well, and again, that was just a gut feeling I had based on where this, I mean, trying to get in the writer's head those first few episodes. I'm like, it feels like that's where she wants to go with this, but again, not until we got to the end did we kind of know that for a fact. But it didn't surprise me, in other words. But the mind wipe thing did also kind of like unsettle me because, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, granted, Jedi could put sort of, they've always said sort of weak-minded people, they could control them, or it's what we've seen, the Jedi mind control, right? Or
Yeah.
there's that
Going back to
aspect.
Obi-Wan.
Well, yeah, but to have someone's mind completely wiped, I don't think we've seen or read that anywhere, have we? I mean,
Or what he did, to have her mind wipe of a specific person
yes,
and event. That
because she was able to recall something when she spoke with Venestra. She just didn't recall those sequence of events, which is like, wow, okay, that's kind of a new level of power there. I don't
Yep.
remember it, right?
Nope.
So
I 100% agree. That didn't.
yeah,
It just struck wrong. Um, and then again, the only way this makes sense is if Vanestra's on the secretly working on the dark side somehow, because she comes up with this whole soul soul murdered his compadres and then committed suicide to the Senate, and it just I don't know, it just struck me as wrong.
well, but again, he didn't. So I mean, it's her spin on things. I know you mentioned that a few
Correct.
episodes ago, which was, oh, gee, I hope he doesn't commit suicide. Well, he didn't. I mean, this is just her spin on it, and I guess if you were to sort of extrapolate that conversation, I mean, that's where our next topic is probably with her and Yoda. But if the continuation of this show goes into another series or season or whatever, if the idea is so is Yoda going to say, well, gee, that's to himself. I mean, that time the guy's 700 something years old, but I'm thinking he's been around long enough. He'd probably say, yeah, that's not the Saul I know. Why would he kill himself? And
Yep.
unless
Well,
he,
but that goes to the next question. Two questions that I want to ask you. One, okay, we're assuming that she told Yoda the truth, and if she did tell Yoda the truth, would Yoda just stand for it, for the lies to the Senate? That doesn't sound like Yoda to me. And two, did she lie to Yoda? And like you said, that doesn't sound like Soul to me. How was he not able to sense it, that she
yeah.
was lying? You know what I'm saying? So
Well,
either
I even though I agree with you as a fan, I think from a writer or directorial standpoint, they're going to find a way out of it, which is, well, you see, this is why, this is part of the reason why the Jedi were having a hard time discerning where that the Sith were returning, 80 something years later. I mean, that's how they're going to find a way to write itself out. But as a fan, I'm like, yeah, that's just BS. I mean, it just feels kind of like, I'm
I
not
don't
going
know.
to.
Lore wise, what do you think? Do you think she told him the truth? And what is
No,
it
no. I think she was probably consistent with the story that she told
with her
the
character?
the,
Yeah.
the senators. I think that's probably what she told them because remember. I mean, yes, there was Jimmy Olsen Jedi. He was sort of in on, hey, at least alerting her. There's this going on. Soul's trying to get a hold of us, but he didn't know the true aspect of the mission. He didn't even know there was one until there was some information brought to his attention that he passed along to her. So if I'm understanding the whole 8 episodes correctly, she's now the only one that has any remaining that has any true sense or idea of
what
of the
happened.
Jedi's mission, yeah, of
Yeah.
what happened, except for the girls. But again, one of them now has conveniently, forgotten certain things, and
Yeah.
then the other two are now bad guys in another part of the galaxy. So, as far as those people within the Jedi proper, she's the only one, right? So,
Well,
so
I agree with you. I think she would have lied to Yoda, tell
I
him that,
agree.
but like you said, Yoda would have been like, "Well, that doesn't sound like the soul I know." And then two, does that kind of make Yoda look like an idiot? Because why was he not able to sense it? You know what I'm saying? Or does he sense
Well,
it, not
and
trust her?
keep in mind she's not on the council, right? I mean, she's just a high-ranking Jedi master, but she's not on the council. So my thinking is you'd have to see it in the context of his conversations with other council members, and what that's sort of the behind-the-scenes stuff I like to see. Like
Oh yeah,
that
me
is
too. Me too. Like,
so so
does he
so
go
it's
to does he go to Mace or whoever and say, "Hey, this bitch is lying to me"?
well, but again, I don't even think Mace would be born yet, right? I mean, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm just saying.
there are, if I'm sure there are characters like that, and he would have that discussion like, well, what do you think? Because he's only going to know so much, especially if she's lied to him. He may think that, granted, she could be using the force to sort of use a little level of deceit, but he may or may not be able to pick up on the full extent of that. Or he may say,
He might
well,
just he might just sense duplicitous somehow.
there you go. There you go. So I guess that's something to be seen for another day. But as it stands, I'm really not interested in seeing a second season. So I don't know if I'll be tuning in for the next series. But I've been pretty faithful. I've been pretty faithful for all these years and for all these different shows, even the ones that have popped up in the last few years.
Well,
And
let's get to it. What's your opinion? I mean, just straight out, do you just from the way this is, from two reasons, from the way this has been received, which I think it's been more negative than positive. Although there are people that love it,
yeah,
and then two, ratings wise, supposedly the ratings weren't that good. And then just from your own thoughts, do you think one, does it deserve a season two with different writers? Maybe they can change it around. Or two, do you think we'll even get a second season?
does it deserve a second season? No. Could it be salvaged? Yes. I think if you had a different crew behind it, yeah, but you're probably going to have to not necessarily recast main characters, but you're going to have to beef up the cast with some more serious actors, I think, or better actors, and maybe take the story in a different direction, and maybe tone it down. Instead of all these different plot lines, just keep it to a handful, one, two. In other words, you got your main, and then you've got one or two maybe sub stories or subplots. But again, that depends on how long. My guess is they're probably going to would want to do another 8 episodes. So you better keep it lean and keep it so that it's consistent. It makes sense. But I still go back to what I said after the first couple episodes, because I gave it a chance. But I think by episode 3, I said, of what I've seen, I think this is probably the worst of all the, or I should say, maybe the weakest of all the
Yeah, good way.
stuff that they've done, as far as stuff that I've seen on Disney Plus.
And do we get another season?
Oh yeah, I think you're going to see it. I think that Disney, because here's the thing, there are certain things within this series that I think Disney wants to continue to push: a certain narrative, a certain look, a certain feel, whatever you want to call it. We saw it in the sequel trilogy as well, which is why you're going to see a Rey movie, which is why there may be some other stuff coming down the road. But I mean, they made a whole theme park after, again, in my mind, stuff that came after the fact, based on the sequel trilogy and not the original trilogy. So, what it tells me is Disney's looking to try and expand the universe. In other words, let's tell the story of Star Wars from different viewpoints, whether it's based on sex or, gender, whatever their angle in on it is. I think they're trying to get away from the stuff that we all grew up with for the first 30 plus years of the franchise. And so I think their idea of continuing the franchise is to go in their direction and then sprinkle in things that we're all familiar with.
I
So
think I think that's true, and I think as far as like I'm all down for, you know that's what makes this series extra disappointing, because here we go, we're starting with something far away, something that hasn't been touched on really, at least in the live action version, or even I think even really cartoon. But it's been touched on in books and comics, and that's a previous era. No Skywalkers. They could have really done something good, but they just did so much to tie it in anyways. It's like, it should have, they shouldn't have had the virgins. They shouldn't have had the the twins being born of the Force. They didn't have to have uh, Yoda in there. They could have just it could have just been its own thing, set in its own. Sure they could have echoes of the Senate and the Jedi and how they end up dealing with each other by Episode 1. But what I'm saying is there was so much potential, especially the way this series was originally pitched to the public as okay, it's going to deal with we're going to deal. Every show deals with the Jedi. This show is going to deal with how the Sith and their acolyte. I thought we were going to get more of that, more of the how they kind of intertwined themselves in with the Senate and kind of became embedded. You know what I'm saying? And that's what makes
Yeah.
it disappointing. Is that it just seems like they failed on even what they wanted or what they said they were going to do.
Well, exactly. The fans that I talked to before the series premiered, I think to a person, were all looking forward to it. In other words, they were willing to give it a
Oh
chance.
yeah, I was
And
hyped.
and I think they were open to the idea of it being something different than taking place in the not timeline, but time period
Yeah,
that we were familiar with. So, but they've effectively, I think, thrown that away. Now, again, they're going to make something of it. I mean, I don't think it just goes away. They've spent the money, they've spent time, and look, we could have done some things different. There could have been some creative decisions done a little differently. Obviously, they were for this show, but you know what? It's salvageable in their mind. I think they're going to say we can even repackage it, or we can tweak it a little bit, maybe carry over a few of the characters and start with a bunch of new ones, and we'll be fine. I think that's how they're going to look at it. It's not going to be a complete loss, but then again, people apparently Disney also was disappointed with Obi-Wan's ratings, and
yeah.
I kept hearing there was supposed to be a second season possibly, and then that kind of twittered away after a period of time. So I don't even think we're going to see that because I think there were some interesting things there. I didn't agree with everything, but on the whole, I enjoyed it. But
Have you
uh,
seen the movie edit of Obi-Wan? Someone did edit, a 2-hour edit of the show into a movie. Have you seen
no,
it?
no,
I have it somewhere. I could send you the link when I get a chance, but
what'd you
it's
think? What'd
actually
you
pretty
think of that?
good. It's pretty good. It's really good. It's basically slimmed down and trimmed down. It's really good. They basically made like I said, a movie out of all the footage, and it's really good. They got rid of a lot of the stupid stuff. And anyways, I'll have to send you a link. But
Okay, all
just
right.
going back to this episode, let's wrap it up. Imagine this: they spent all that time pushing Jedi Trinity. What if they had gotten her to play Vanestra and the actress to play Vanestra to play and Dora? You know what I'm saying? We could
Yeah.
be having that would have been a lot more interesting.
Well, we would have seen more of Carrie Ann Moss.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think she would have bought more because she was actually pretty. I didn't like lying to the Senate, but she played a good. I thought she did really well. As far as actress wise,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed seeing her. But okay, so me personally, I'm going to say that I don't know if we're going to get a season 2 just because of the reaction. You go online, there's some people that diehard love it, but I don't know if that's the majority of the fans. But then it
Oh,
goes,
no, no. Don't get me wrong. I don't think a majority of the fans like it. But you asked me, do you think there would be a
yeah,
season
no, of
two?
course. But what I'm going to
Yeah.
say is
Yeah.
going to what you're saying. I don't think they really care what the fans think about this
Right.
anymore. Just which seems odd. It seems odd to me, but so we may get into the season. If it came along, I would still give it a chance. If it was the same creators and everything, maybe not. But I'd still watch it just because I'd like to see how it turned
You,
out. But
that's a good point, man. Not just to kind of jump in when you said a different creative team, different showrunner, different director. Then I might, because again, it's going to be different, right?
yeah,
It's just like going into the second sequel film, Ryan Johnson's film.
yeah,
I
don't
was
say
like,
it.
oh, right, and
Say it.
you kind of go in thinking, okay, and
The
then
movie that must not be named.
yeah, yeah, and then afterwards you're like, what the hell was that? So I guess again, hey, if they do make some substantive changes, then maybe I
Yeah,
would be a little more open. Right now, I'm not, but
they definitely change the focus. I think they have to get away from the twin stuff,
yeah,
front and center. But I think I actually find it more interesting now. It's like, okay, what the hell's Vanestra up to? You know what I'm saying? I didn't
right.
like her as a character, but she's just so sleazy. She doesn't come across as a Jedi, but I actually find that interesting more with dealing with the senators and all that. I thought that a lot of things that people complained about the prequels that it was all talking and it was all political stuff. I kind of like that myself. You know what
Me too, and I love that stuff. But I know it's not for everyone. I know they want to just see the laser. Well, they want to see the ships fighting,
Yeah.
space battles, and they want to see the lightsabers and all that. But I take it all, and I enjoy it for what it is. What I don't like is when I see bad acting, bad writing, blah blah blah. But then I kind of like, what the heck here? But no, if it's
Who was the hero of this show, and who do we come out rooting for at the end?
yeah,
Not Soul. It's not Osha. She's the murderer. I mean, really, who?
that's a good question.
You know what I'm saying? Just think of that now. Who is the hero of the show? Who do we in the show rooting for? May? I mean, she killed people too. She can kill Dara.
Well, I guess for those people that don't like a feel-good ending, that's what they got.
Yeah.
But it's odd in the way that I remember hearing someone who used to be a fan, and this is probably, I guess, people of our parents' generation, but people who grew up in the 50s and 60s, who did a comparison with Batman. So, for instance, you and I had the opportunity to grow up, bought the books off the shelves for The Dark Knight in the mid 80s. And I really enjoyed it. Obviously, it was something different than what I grew up with in the 70s and even watching reruns from the 60s. The only reason why I make that comparison is, again, it could be more of a generational thing. It could just be what you're looking for as far as your appetite. But for some of those people that grew up watching the campy 60s show, they just like, it was a complete turnoff to hear and see something like The Dark Knight or what we saw in 89 Batman, right? Those fans, those adults were like, well, this is not what I signed up for. Well, it's different. And maybe that's what the fans now who are growing up, I guess probably from the late 2000s on, they didn't have everything that we had growing up as far as our worldview with Star Wars. And so now they're looking at it through different eyes, and maybe this is what they want, as opposed to what you or I want. So
I think that perfectly encapsulates it. So since there's not much more we can say, let's wrap it up with that, because I think you're right, 100%. I think that's perfectly said. Perfectly said.
Well, I appreciate it. This has been a fun ride. Thanks for having me on board.
Yep. No, thank you, Polly, and thank everyone for whoever's watching. Like I said, please comment. I'm glad we got at least 50 views on that last video. And Paul, you haven't committed, but hopefully we'll be able to do this again, maybe with the Skeleton Crew if you're interested.
I am interested in seeing the show. So yeah, maybe we do this again.
Okay. And again, thanks for being with us on Jedi Business. Paul, take care.
You too, Manny. Take care.
And for everyone, thanks again for watching, or listening, rather. As far as next week, I don't know if there's going to be an episode. We'll see if there's stuff to talk. I might be back. Again, Paul has agreed to do the Acolyte. That's it. Hoping to get him to go again with Skeleton Crew. But again, we'll see. If there's not another episode next week, I'll be back again whenever there's some Star Wars news to talk about. Everyone, thank you, and may the Force be with you.